100% do I agree that, having a language gives you that extra opportunity and gives you more money. The average is about 15% more. So the people who spoke the local dialect could claim up to 15% more. There was just far fewer of them as well.
Welcome to the More Than Words podcast, brought to you by Rosetta Stone UK, preparing you for real-world conversations in new languages. I'm Alex Outhwaite, and in this podcast series, we immerse ourselves in culture by hearing different stories that will inspire, fascinate, and educate. And today, we're bringing you our final episode of the first series, where we discuss language, careers, and how understanding a different culture can set you apart from the rest. Our experts answer all your questions around how self-development allows you to seize new opportunities and cultures while you continue to progress your career. And with me today is Justin McGuire, CEO of DMCG Global, an international recruitment firm, and the wonderful Susie Dent, who's back to chat about language fluidity and how it's helped her career. Welcome, Susie and Justin.
Hi.
Hi.
So we have heard over the past couple of weeks, Susie, a bit about your career and how you got started, but I'd love to dive in with Justin first today. If you could tell me a little bit about how your career got started.
I started my career working in marketing communications in London, albeit nearly 20 years ago. And since then, wow, my job's taken me to Dubai, where I ended up living there for 12 years. I had 1 year where I worked in Latin America, lived and worked in Latin America as well.
Where were you?
I was in Honduras, actually.
Nice.
So don't ask me what I was doing there. I didn't actually realize it was the murder capital of the world when I chose to work there. That was a kind of something I found out afterwards. And then I moved to Singapore 2.5 years ago, and here I am now.
Did you always envisage you'd have a career that would move you around the world like that?
No, I didn't actually. So I started my career in Marcoms, as I said, and then ended up moving into headhunting and sort of finding international talent specifically in the Marcoms world. So my move to go abroad really was brought about by changes in the global economy. In fact, it was the crash in 2008 that first got me to move over to Dubai. Which was probably the most fundamental career choice I made, and then when the oil price sort of teetered a little bit and we looked at sort of putting more focus in Asia than the Middle East on our business, I moved to Singapore. So it's kind of been economic, influences that have made my decision.
You've lived in a few different places as well, Susie, haven't you? Was that always something that you wanted to do from a young age?
I'm not sure it was. I think I just wanted to follow the language, if that doesn't sound silly. So language was definitely my first passion. I don't think I just thought I want to be an adventurer and explorer, but in some ways that's what, following a language does. That's where it takes you. I had some slightly odd encounters. So one of my first stays in Germany was as an au pair to a Finnish family, in fact, whose mum was an ambassador to Germany from Finland, and that was it was a fairly lonely experience, but it was quite a good one for me because I was totally thrown in at the deep end and had no choice but to try and cope with what wasn't brilliant German at that stage. And then I lived in Berlin for a while, lived in Düsseldorf, and lived in France for a little bit, but not quite as much. But Germany I know pretty well, but gosh, there's so much more to discover, obviously. And now that I'm learning Spanish, thanks to Rosetta Stone, hopefully that's going to be my next destination.
When you were an au pair in Germany, you could already speak the language?
A little bit, but obviously I was there to try and teach some Finnish kids English, but they had a Spanish and a French au pair before me, so they were slightly confused, although kids just absorb all this stuff. They were incredible. And I was really lucky. I was really young, and I had my own little tiny apartment, which was above a department store right in the middle of the city, but away from the family and away from anyone that I knew. So I had some sort of quite a few evenings where I put the headphones on and kind of wallow in melancholy, but that was absolutely fine. It was quite a good learning experience. And then I had to just try speaking with what I had And people were incredibly kind, in fact. And I still, to this day, so one of my greatest achievements ever is to be speaking to a German person. I'd been there for a long time. And when I told her that I was English, she didn't believe me. And I don't think she was kidding. And yeah, as I say, that's still one of the kind of nicest compliments I've ever had. I'm not sure it'll be the case now, but we'll see.
There are actually quite a lot of jobs from a young age, like you said about being an au pair. There's a lot of jobs that give you the opportunity to travel the world. So I went to teach English in Vietnam, for example, and that was almost straight out of university. So I think a lot of people don't realize how many opportunities there are, even for kind of 18, 19-year-olds, to travel the world while working.
Yeah, there's the British Council. There's so many organisations actually now that facilitate it, and so much voluntary work overseas. I mean, obviously, now with the pandemic, it's incredibly difficult. So I really feel for people who are trying to get out there now and, absorb culture and language. But hopefully, it will come back.
That's a good lead on to ask you, actually, Justin. So, in your industry, how do you think that being bilingual helps you stand out from the crowd, from other applicants for jobs?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I've obviously, having spent 12 years abroad, working abroad now in Asia and Middle East, I've really seen, I think when CVs come through to our business, I've really seen the value in having, say, someone that speaks Arabic and how a brand can, react to that. But also being here in Asia now, where the Chinese influence is so immense, the speaking Mandarin, how much that can help, candidates as well. So I think language, it's clear that language is going to play an increasingly important role. And if you want to have an internet, most people kind of seem to expect that speaking English kind of can get you a job anywhere. And I've really sort of seen that as particularly the past 5 or 6 years, that just isn't the case, that there's an increasing demand for refined skills, and language is probably the top of that. And for us, certainly it's been Arabic and Mandarin based where we work, but it's also Japanese. I do a lot of work in Japan, and a lot of people want to work there, but there they don't speak, they really don't speak English like they do in, say, Singapore. Japanese is the first formal language there, and the only chance of ever getting a job somewhere like Japan, or exotic like Japan, or Thailand and Indonesia, is speaking a local dialect.
It's interesting you say that, actually, because I think, like you said, a lot of the time in the past, people would think they wanted native English speakers, and that would be at the top. Whereas actually now we might find that as Brits, generally, as we can't speak as many second languages, we actually might be moving down the pile of international candidates.
Yeah, I think that very much. I mean, in Singapore, for example, I think less so in Dubai, where I've lived before, but in Singapore especially, like 90% of the people we moved jobs for people last year were actually based in Singapore. So and language requirement was pretty much essential for all of them, and that language was Mandarin. Okay, so people. I often get sort of British and American candidates reach out, and I think there's a bit of a presumption that they can land a job just because they speak English, and that's just not the case anymore at all. It's that you really need to come at, if you want to take an international gig, shall we say, that you need to have specifically need to have a language in your locker if you're going to succeed. Now that would be the same if you want to grab a job in Spain or Germany as well. There isn't. There is always an assumption, I think, from British people, especially, that because they speak British, they can get an international gig, and I just not seen that being the case.
So do you think now people that can speak a few languages can really stand out from the crowd?
Yeah, 100%. And actually, I don't think it, I see it, So when we're briefed on positions, or when businesses want to look to expand and grow into an area, that's when they work with us, right? So that's when I hear firsthand what their requirements are. And if someone wants to move someone with their companies, let's say they're from the UK or the USA or an English, where English is the first language, then what often they'll do is they'll move someone from the HQ to kind of take that DNA and culture with them from the actual business. But most businesses want to do is build out from within a company where you're embracing local culture, and of course top of that list is language. So yeah, I'm seeing it all the time now, and increasingly so, that the battle for talent is getting, it's getting harder to land a job, and particularly with the COVID situation at the moment, there are a lot of people looking. So what's going to get you top of that list? And it's going to be language.
I think also as well as the actual language skills, having those skills can build your confidence and things as well in other aspects of the job field. In fact, a friend of mine messaged me yesterday, and he's just started working at TikTok, and he's not required to speak any other languages apart from English. But he actually messaged me and said, "Oh, you use Rosetta Stone, don't you, to learn Spanish?" And I said, "Yes." And he said that as part of the job offer, when they sign up to work for TikTok, they get given the Rosetta Stone software to encourage them to learn a new language. And I think that's just a confidence thing. It's just adding a skill set, because he's not required to speak a different language, but I think his company think it's a benefit for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah. I would agree. And I think also, just purely from a kind of a business point of view, you're never going to be able to keep up with innovation in a different market if you don't know the language, because in some ways, you have to know your linguistic audience. It's as crucial as knowing your market. And there have been so many howlers, haven't there, over the years, where companies have sort of moved into a different market, come up with some amazing ad slogan without realizing quite how that's going to go down. So I'll give you one example, which has become infamous, which is Zizi's restaurant chain. And Zizi in French means a certain part of the male anatomy. And then there's a sports shoe shop in France called Athlete's Foot.
I always remember seeing that, yeah. And they think it's such a good name. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to shop there.
I know, and it works both ways as well. So there's just some famous, well, in English, there was a great example of the difference between American English and British English. And I'm pretty sure this one existed, but it was a long time ago. But it was Electrolux who had just come out with some incredibly powerful vacuum cleaner, and they launched it in Europe with this ad slogan, and they decided, great, we're going to take this to the US. And the ad slogan was, "Nothing sucks like an Electrolux." Without knowing that in America, if something sucks, it's actually really bad. So there's so many examples of that you absolutely have to know a local market, and in order to do that, you have to sort of think local to be global in some ways. And the only real gateway to that, I think, is languages. It's so important from a commercial point of view that if you really want to get someone like TikTok, getting all the sort of, the various vibes from different places and how well they're going down, because culturally, something can be incredibly offensive, even if it's very conservative in another country.
That's a good point, actually. I suppose because TikTok's so international and everyone's watching videos in a lot of different languages, it might help as well if the staff are a little bit more aware of other languages or other cultures.
Yeah.
So Justin, I believe that you can speak Spanish. Is that correct?
Well, there's a bit of story here. So before I started the working world, I guess I was born in Los Angeles and left there after sort of 6 months, and then my dad's job took us to Spain. So I grew up in the south of Spain. So that was great. And like you were saying earlier, Susie, you sort of, as a kid, you pick up everything as a sponge, and I didn't actually take any lessons whatsoever. But I found myself at home sort of being the translator for the family. And it was, I think I was just immersed in the culture. So all my friends were Spanish and everything I did was in Spanish, and I thought and I dreamt in Spanish. Not so much anymore, unfortunately.
That's the real key, isn't it? Dreaming in the language.
It was life, and it came back when I then went to Honduras, went to Latin America. It sort of all came pouring back, and I picked it up really quickly again there. But it was interesting to see the different dialects that obviously that Latin America used versus what they were using in Spain. And actually, a lot of the words that I took for granted, they could either be quite rude over there, or just that people didn't understand them at all, So, and vice versa, when you then, when I got back and then went on a holiday in Spain and I started speaking Latin American dialect, people were like, yeah, okay, I get that, but that doesn't make sense what you've said. I've really noticed that as also in Arabic. So that's a language I've got, having lived in Arabia for a long time. I didn't realize just how many different dialects there are to Arabic as well. What someone in Saudi sounds like versus what someone in Morocco sounds like versus what Syria sounds like. they're completely different. And the words can mean, particularly in such a part of the world where religion and the way phraseology is used in religion is so sensitive. You've got to be so careful, or you can like offend, 3/4 of the room, particularly if you think you're being a bit clever, like I was once, and sort of relayed a couple of Arabic words and actually almost offended the people in the room, whereas I thought I was being quite smart,
There's nothing worse than that look of horror and you've absolutely no idea how you elicited it. Yes, I've had that before as well.
I found actually through quite a lot of South America that, so when I was in Ecuador, I felt I was doing quite well with my Spanish, and I was starting to be able to understand what people were saying and have fairly in-depth conversations. And then as soon as I got over the border into Colombia, I suddenly found that I wasn't able to understand as well. People were speaking so quickly, and it just varies so much from country to country, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's probably the same in English. If you speak to someone from Newcastle versus you speak to someone from Cornwall, you're going to get a very different experience, and it's the same.
It's funny because as a kind of lexicographer, I get to see that for non-native speakers of English as well. Because in my experience, non-native speakers are amongst the most expressive and proficient in English, almost more proficient than native speakers, because they learn the grammar, which we don't do over here, and they're incredible. But there are so many shades of meaning, and if you were to look up in the databases that we use when we're charting language and seeing what's bubbling under and stuff, you'll see, like, I remember getting asked by a Spanish speaker about the word ambitious, because ambition is a good thing. So if you look up ambition in our database, you'll see that it's usually accompanied by quite positive adjectives. But just take the word ambitious, and you will find, like, she's ambitious. There's all sorts of kind of negative stuff that comes in, especially if it's a woman, I have to say, which is not particularly positive. And this Spanish woman who asked me, she couldn't quite understand why to say that someone was ambitious could actually be quite a negative thing, that implies sort of backbiting and cutthroat and all of that stuff. So there's just, in English as well, there's so many shades of meaning that actually only until you really understand a culture, I think, can you really get on top of them.
I found that in Vietnam actually quite a lot with the word fat. A lot of my Vietnamese friends, for them it wouldn't be an insult if someone was saying you look fat. They'd mean you look well, you look healthy. Whereas I think a lot of the kind of English and Americans, it took quite a lot of getting used to. If we were being called this, I mean, I remember I was given an essay by one of my students that said, my teacher is Miss Alex. She's very nice. And she is not thin. And I thought, oh God.
That's brilliant. That's
the kind of essay.
In America as well, actually. I've just remembered now, because I did some teaching there, and they always called the chubby kid El Gordo. And and they used to be that. I used to think, God, that's really rude. I'd like, if I was a kid at school, I'd be that would, demons, live with me the rest of my life. But they're like, yeah, sense of pride,
Exactly. They'd say, oh, we want to be fat like you, and it's not a compliment.
I'm hoping that the tables are turning a little bit. I just would love to be kind of curvy. We always use the euphemism curvy, don't we? I genuinely would love to be curvy. So who knows? But yeah, it's a very Western hang up, that, isn't it, I think.
So you must be surrounded by a lot of different languages in Singapore, Justin.
Yeah, I mean, out here in Singapore, you are obviously people speaking Mandarin. You've got people, I mean, I think in one of my clients that I work with, they were telling me there's 33 different nationalities they've got in their office. Now, that's incredible. And obviously Singapore, it's, quite heavy Mandarin, but it's also Malay. And there's also a lot of people who come from Indian or Punjabi heritage as well. So I've been surrounded by them here in Singapore for different languages for the 2.5 years I've been here, and you get quite used to it. And in Dubai, I'd say it was even more, because there in Dubai, it's like 90% of the workforce in the Middle East still is reliant on expats coming in. The UAE has pretty much built that country on a build it and they will come philosophy, and there especially I really sort of felt myself surrounded by continuously. That's where I actually was using the Spanish more, because you would, there's a lot of Latinos in the creative industry that I work in. There's a lot of Latinos there. And you find, that comes in quite handy there, which I never really thought it would when I was in the UAE, speaking Spanish. But, and they also, for those people that speak French, there's a lot of French speakers in the Middle East as well. There's a lot of Lebanese heritage. There's a lot of Lebanese people there, but also the luxury industry is huge there, and that's mostly filled with French people.
So Justin, it sounds like your grasp of languages has actually helped you fit in all over the world and not just in the countries that you'd expect it to help.
Yeah, it has, and that's why it's just so beneficial to have a language, because you never know when it's going to come in handy, not just on holiday, but so much in a professional perspective. Even if you don't speak it fluent, it can be so handy. I speak to people, even though I've been based abroad, or when I've worked in the UK, I don't just speak to people in my field. I don't just speak to people from England, right, or from the UK. I speak to an international candidate base. So, I am often talking to people from Spain or from France or from Uruguay, Japan, etc. So if you know the language, you can just develop such a personal relationship with that person. And it just makes the journey, particularly in my field, when you work with them, that much smoother.
When you've got all of these multilingual candidates who are applying to your recruitment firm, do you think that it allows them to jump up the pay scale a little bit if they can speak a number of different languages?
Absolutely. In fact, we've got, prior to this, I was looking at the statistics, and it's actually, I say the average is about 15% more. So wow. The people who spoke the local dialect could claim up to 15% more. Also, there was just far fewer of them as well. So that, they were in demand. So not only could they, negotiate from a position of strength, but there was that sort of security that perhaps if it didn't work out with the employer that they're with, that there's plenty of other people that would be interested in them. So 100% do I agree that, having a language gives you that extra opportunity and gives you more money.
No, as I can say, there was some great research done in the US by a man called Johnson O'Connor, and he was trying to look at the various factors or the various skills that people have as predictors of success in business. And vocabulary was by far and away the biggest predictor, but not just in your native language, but also if you had that in a foreign language, it just, as Justin said, it just kind of propelled you, skywards really, because it enables so many different things and unlocks so much different potential. And he basically eliminated all other variables. So it was very, very clear that vocab, both in your native language and non-native language, was, as I say, the biggest predictor of success in life, kind of financially. But I don't know if he was looking at it from a kind of cultural and personal fulfillment point of view, but you could easily say the same for that too, I think.
So Justin, in terms of furthering your career, do you think that an immersive app like Rosetta Stone can actually help people get ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, as I've said before, furthering languages can play a massive part in furthering your career. And it's, I've got all the facts to back it up, and I've been living and breathing it for 12 years as well. So, I think that's where I've really seen, there are a lot of great things that say British talent can bring to an employer, but where one thing they've really lacked is language skills, and it's quite often where they get pipped at the post. So something like Rosetta Stone can be a real valuable tool. It's interesting that TikTok, like what you said, have plugged it in as part of their induction program, because I'm actually hearing this more and more. I think the US tech companies have really jumped onto this actually, and that's, I think maybe because of the value, how much they're worth and how much they can put towards induction programs for employees. But I think that's really something a lot of employers, if they particularly international businesses or companies that want to open up a hub, they've got to make sure that their employees, particularly if they're bringing them over, have got an insight into language and culture. I'd say, that's the two things are really important if you're going to succeed, and if that international career is going to be as successful as you want it to be, then language is just going to play a huge role in that. That's a fact.
So unfortunately, I think that's just about all that we've got time for today. So just a really big thank you to you, Justin, and to you as well, Susie. It really sounds like languages can put us ahead in our field.
Without doubt. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks a lot. That's been brilliant.
In honour of our expert guest, Susie Dent, who's known for her word of the day on Twitter, we are giving you the opportunity to win a year's subscription to the Rosetta Stone app. All you have to do is tweet Susie with your favourite foreign word of the day from a language discussed in this episode, along with the hashtag #MoreThanWords, and Susie will retweet her favourite. Bonne chance!